Bill, Wendy, and Jonathan from Carolina Capital Management.
Hola.
We are kind of throwing in an audible. We have Jonathan Davis here as one of our partners here in the firm.
So it's a bonus.
That's right. Want to thank Fred and Tracy for inviting us again to another.
That's right.
Cash Flow Expo.
We're 4-year followers here. We're the OG.
The OG. I like that.
In case you don't know who we are a lender in the Southeast. We also have a couple of funds that people can invest in. We are a private lender doing short-term bridge loans and long-term investor loans as well for single family and multifamily, typically throughout the Southeast. You want to add anything else?
Well, we have side gigs too. We are in the.
I pan for gold.
Yeah, and he stands on the corner begging for bucks too. But we have side gigs. We have Airbnb, short-term rental properties that we're doing in different states, and
so we are
long-term.
Long-term. I mean, all of us own real estate, investment real estate as well.
That's right. Getting into self-storage at this point as well. So. And, we've been lending I've been lending since 2001. You started back in the early 1900s.
I've been in the mortgage business since 1989.
That's right.
Yeah, back when I used to have to calculate everything on an actual calculator.
That's right.
And then I started in the secondary markets, buying and selling notes, which a lot of you are familiar with, and then converted over to the lending side.
That's right. So we've got a lot of different experience here, and our goal is to just blow your mind, right?
Well, to educate at least. So we thought it would be appropriate, since it's the beginning of a new year and we have a lot of changes coming that we can see. Rising interest rates. We obviously have inflation that's highest in the last 40 years
since 1982.
So we have decided that we wanted to talk about some of the best assets that you can invest in that will hedge against inflation. So we are going to get right to the presentation. That would be first slide.
And when he brings it up, just count to 5.
Yeah.
What? 1 second. 1 second. 1 second.
Okay, so our presentation is titled Cash Flow While Hedging Against Rising Rates, Inflation, and the Fed.
Our favorite.
It's a lot going on there.
That is.
I'm excited.
Is.
Next slide. What we'll cover: cash flowing assets that we feel are the best inflation hedges. Next bullet point. When should you invest directly in an asset? Next bullet point.
Should you use cash or should you leverage? When you should invest indirectly.
Indirect investments, funds, their types and their structure.
Okay, so our first is going to be, pause. Let's back that up, Scott. There you go. That's all right.
Go ahead and put it up there.
Go back up with the 1. All right, so we'll stop here and pause. Cash flowing assets that we feel are the best hedges are going to be number 1, first and foremost. We love single family housing, 1 to 4 units. And the main reason for us is because it's the most liquid real estate asset out there.
when we say yes, and when we say single family 1 to 4, we're talking affordable housing, single family 1 to 4.
No McMansions.
Sadly, no.
That's right. The single family, of course, has always been a bread and butter market for us. But what's really changed, I think, especially the past few years, is focusing really on that affordable housing market, and it's different for every state. What that affordable price range is. In the Southeast, where we do a lot of business, we're really looking at 300 and under, and what the after repaired value is. And the reason why we like those types of properties, we call them recession resistant, but we like them because as a lender, we look at it and say, hey, if we have to take that house back tomorrow, we know that we can turn around and rent that property and still get a return to our investors. And you, whether or not you're a rehabber or an investor investing in a loan or a lender or however you're doing that, you need to have that same thought, even as the rehabber or the contractor doing the work, right?
Yeah, and again, we've always talked about this. It's the asset that you, like, first-time home buyers can come into. It's the asset that investors who want to rent a property buy, and it's the asset that people who are downsizing downsize into. So the buying pool for this single family asset that is affordable has the largest buying pool in the nation. Right. So it is the most liquid.
And it's the easiest to get a loan for.
Yes.
Right?
And that's why it makes it the most, one of the reasons it makes it the most liquid. As a lender, I want to reiterate that we want to be able to sell the asset first, because we don't want to be management companies
right
on the property management
That's
side.
Right.
Yeah, we're not good landlords.
We'd rather sell it first, and you can, because you have that bigger piece of the buying pie
right
in a single family. And what's happening right now is that there's a limited supply, so you have appreciation that's taking place. So as you have these properties that can produce cash flow, they're also going up in value.
That's right.
And it's going to continue for a while because there's going to be a continuation of limited supply because people want those.
Now, we don't think that increase in value is going to continue like it has in 2021, but
no,
it will continue.
I mean, it's going to, from our estimations, level out to normal, kind
whatever
of
that is.
That's, well, historically, 2 to 4% appreciation per year is considered normal.
Right.
Not 17% like in 2021.
Yeah. So the rate of appreciation is going to slow down a little bit as the cost of financing is going to rise over time, but it's still an asset that people desire.
Mm.
Right. And we have a lot to get in, so we probably should go to the next bullet point, don't you think?
Yep. Okay, multifamily. We still want to stay in that affordable range as well. So your class,
B and C.
Yeah, class B and C multifamily is going to be the most desired because you cannot build class B and C multifamily anymore. The cost of land is far too high. Like, you just can't do it.
And windows.
The supply chain issues. Increase the inflation on goods. So that buying either a stabilized B or C or buying a not stabilized B and C and then stabilizing it, that is, from my opinion, a great asset to be in.
Plus the number of units in that project has a lot to do with, I think, affordability and your lending abilities, your borrowing abilities, actually, is what I should say. So what do you think the number of doors that people should really be looking for that's kind of unique, that's affordable, that they'll be able to find?
Mm-hmm.
What do you think that is?
I would say under 50 doors. And why I say that is typically under 50 doors is going to be managed by what we deem a mom and pop person, who, someone who either is, bought the property managing it themselves, or they inherited it from their parents or whomever they inherited it from. They, typically what we see is it passes down 1 or 2 generations, and the people who are running it aren't very sophisticated. They're not running it super well, and they're always willing to sell it. Now, those are great opportunities because they weren't running it well. Typically, they're going to be $100 to $300 under market rent. So that's a value add immediately. And then you're going to, I would say, down to, all the way down to typically the bare minimum was just 5 units. That is a great opportunity. Now
Less competition too.
Yeah, and great. Bill, talk about that.
Well, less competition because it's outside of where your larger equity funds and larger operators want to be in. They want 250, 500, 1,000 doors.
Yeah.
Or it's not worth their.
Yeah, typically REITs won't look at a property if it's under 100 doors. They won't even entertain it.
If they can't have on-site management,
Correct.
they don't want to touch it.
And at 100 to 150 doors is typically the minimum for the economies of scale to make sense for on-site management.
Plus, you have to keep in mind that mom and pops are more willing to either sell or finance, and most of their loans, if they have one in that price range, most of their loans are assumable.
Yeah.
So the lending options in that price range is plentiful.
Yeah, and there's also there is long-term lending options for that if you can acquire those. Now acquiring these types of multifamily that are mom and pop owned, they're very difficult to locate if you don't know what you're doing. Typically, mailers and direct mailing is going to be your best way to get in contact with these people. They're not going to be working with some fancy broker who's going to be showing this out to all the the big firms because it's 50 doors or less. Like the broker's going to say my commission on that is nothing. I can go get a 250 door and make 100,000.
Yeah, most of those brokers do 1 or 2 deals, maybe 3 a year.
Yeah.
So that one's not going to be worth their trouble.
Right.
But, and the best part is in the Southeast, and we'll talk about the Southeast specifically, rents have increased in multifamily.
Right.
We, when COVID first hit, we thought they would decrease as people wanted more space, more room to work from home, all these different things. But what we have seen is they have actually appreciated over the last year, which is great for if you're owning them, but they're still affordable. Like I said, those B and C level assets, you're looking at between $600 and $1,200 a month in rent.
Right. Excellent. So, pause.
Well, hold up. I'm really sorry.
That's all right.
I just got this dry cough thing going. I'm really sorry. Okay. Don't worry about that, Bill. We have a timer right up here in the corner in the left hand that we can see pretty loud.
We're doing 13 minutes.
Okay.
All right. So we're almost halfway through. Well.
Okay.
All right. So,
Next slide.
or bullet point. Okay. So let's talk about manufactured homes. People kind of cringe from that, but it's got to be specific. Manufactured homes on titled land. We have a good friend in the industry that is killing it with investment for rent manufactured
And there's a
homes.
speaker on Cash Flow Expo as well. That's
Yeah,
going
but
to be
those are
talking about.
specifically mobile home parks.
Oh, okay. Well, I
Right.
wasn't aware of that. That's awesome.
So these are basically just manufactured houses.
On one or
On
like a
land.
half an acre to 1 acre.
Otherwise
kind of thing.
known as cash cows.
And you don't have to worry about renting a home in the hood because there's no neighborhoods with these things.
Yeah.
They're out a little bit from, the cities. They typically have, like you said, an acre to a half an acre of land. You can park all your RVs and ATVs.
That's
and
right.
stuff on them.
But the thing is, too, manufactured homes for investors, it's more and more difficult to find lenders who will lend to an investor on mobile homes. There's a few out there, and I'd name them if I knew them off the top of my head. But in this case, you're really going to have to look for a private lender that would be willing to do that, or you might have it in your self-directed accounts that you may be lending money out of or buying property out of. This would be a really good opportunity for you to get some cash flow because they make money.
Yeah, because you're solving to a much higher return on investment with the manufactured homes. Typically, what we're seeing is 12%.
And then seller financing these, creating your own note and seller financing them, you can sell them so quickly, and people are willing to put big money down. I recently did one, I say recently, it's probably been 4 years, where I got a $20,000 down payment on an $89,000 property. So you can really get a good down payment on that, create a seller finance note, and have good cash flow.
Yeah,
off
the pros is that like the entry point, I guess the cash to entry is much lower.
Right.
The downside is the financing ability
Right.
is much less.
Right.
It's tougher for you to get leverage, but you can create leverage.
So
you're going to have to. It's more of a cash-heavy business.
Right.
Correct. So you're going to need your own cash to do this, or somebody else's cash, whether it's their cash or their self-directed IRA lending to you. So
friends, family,
Yeah.
IRA folks that want to put their money to work.
That's right.
yeah, and it's someone who wants their money to work for a longer period of time.
Mhm.
Because I would not suggest going into this saying, okay, I need a 12-month loan to get this thing going, and then I'll find an exit for it.
And don't think these things don't appreciate. If they're on land, they're going to appreciate.
Sure.
There's a lot of statistics out there that are showing that these things are going up in value.
Sure.
Well, I know when I created the note on the one that I sold, I set it up so that it was on a 10-year term for the person I was selling it for.
Mhm.
I wanted them to see a light at the end of their tunnel.
Yep.
And I worked it out so that the payment that they were paying me was really about what they would be paying in rent.
Yeah.
And then I backed my way into whatever that interest rate was.
It's the same thing, in the used car industry. No one cares what the interest rate is. What is my payment?
That's right.
That's all it is. What is the payment?
That's right.
So we say on average 12%, but we know a lot of people who are getting 18, 20, 24% interest on these things because it just boils down to what is your entry level? Like where did you enter the product at? And then what can that borrower afford that is comparable rent somewhere else? So if you entered at a lower barrier, then you can charge a much higher interest rate because that payment is comparable to rent anywhere else.
That's right.
Either way, it's cash flow. You're making money on the sale of the property, and you're making money in the interest you're receiving from your loans.
Mm-hmm.
Next bullet point. Okay, so when should you invest directly in an asset? So this is depending on who you are and what your goals are and where you are in your finances.
And your family life.
Yeah, so
whether
so
your
when-
kids are little or in college or
Yep.
you're retired. Where are you?
Yeah, so one example is when you want to build a portfolio of rental properties. There are people that just want to hold physical property. They feel good about owning the property.
Right. Plus, they're looking for that depreciation.
Yeah, looking for depreciation. They're looking for, that's the beautiful thing about portfolio of rentals.
Yeah.
You get depreciation, you get appreciation, and you get cash flow.
Right.
Assuming you're doing it right. So I personally subscribe to this one.
Yeah.
This is what I do. I know Wendy's more into the short-term rentals and storage, but I like this because I can see a portfolio and I can touch it. I know what's going on, and then also, in my thought is the appreciation's building. So in 5, 10, 20 years, whatever that case may be, I have almost a free and clear portfolio of properties that I can now sell as a portfolio to another investor.
Right.
And that's, and that's where you
Well,
create your liquidity events.
That's right.
If you move it, or say, let's look at the note business too. It runs the same way. A portfolio. You don't want to buy one note. You don't want to buy one rental property.
That's right.
You need to have a bigger diversified footprint because, as we all know in real estate, you're always going to own a stinker or two.
That's right.
Yep.
I've had one or two.
I'm working through a few.
So you want at least to have the ability for the other ones to make money while you reconcile the stinker.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
Next slide. again, taking advantage of what the tax code, and again, none of us are tax attorneys
We don't even
or
play one on
tax
TV.
specialists or
Nope.
CPAs, but we all want to keep as much of the money that we earn as possible.
What is it?
right.
It's not what you make, it's what you keep.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
And the government has been so kind as to give us some tax benefits of property ownership.
Somewhere in that $10,000 or 10,000 page document.
And understand that they change constantly.
Yeah.
Well, most countries, actually all countries, have about 20 pages of tax rules. The United States just has about 2,000 pages of how to get around the
We
tax
do everything
rules.
better.
But, the government at some point decided that they wanted to promote ownership of property. And,
Yep.
and that's why they have these in the tax code. So yes, you can take losses when you spend money, spend more money than you're receiving.
Mhm.
And then at the same time, you can depreciate these properties over time, keeping in mind that when you sell it, you have to pay back that depreciation, but it offsets any capital gains.
Yeah, and that's
you might have to
the whole BRRRR strategy that investors use is they want to buy, rehab, refinance, and repeat, and so you're buying in low, you're rehabbing, forcing new value, and then you refinance. You take, if you can create the value that you're setting out to do, you take cash out when you refinance, which is tax free. So now you've maxed out the LTV to whatever you want it to be, somewhere between 70 and 80. I suggest closer to 70. And you get that cash tax free. You use that to go into your next property, and then you collect you utilize the depreciation, and now you have cash flow on top of that, and then you build appreciation along the way, and you just keep doing that and doing that. So that is a great way. Cash out refinances are a great way to avoid taxes.
And then eventually you can pass it down to your children who don't want it and sell it right away.
Not me, I'm spending it all.
Next slide. Okay. When should you invest directly in an asset again? When someone else, or when you have someone else pay for your investment.
I always like that.
That's the beautiful thing about owning real estate, is that you're able to build this portfolio while someone else is paying your way.
Or at least most of
Isn't
them.
that a beautiful thing?
Yeah.
It is.
Now, obviously, you want to make a profit as well, but that's not, you at least have to pay the bills.
Yeah. And that's what cash flow is all about. Not just paying your bills, but also being able to collect enough money to fix the issues that might come up,
Right.
will come up, and have a profit on top of that.
Mhm.
Don't sell yourself short by buying a house just because of appreciation.
Yeah.
That's not cash flow.
And
That's hoping for the best.
And
It's
cash-
gambling.
and cash flow, sometimes we can get a little confused. So like your return on your investment or your internal rate of return, if you utilize someone else's money to buy this asset and fix it, or whatever the case may be, your return on your investment, which is your cash flow, your cash on cash return,
Mm-hmm.
is far higher, even if it's the same number, even if you're solving to a $200 a month, which is what most people solve to on the rentals, $200 a month income per, on these rentals. If you have no money in it or very little, your cash flow is way higher than if you put 50% of the money in yourself.
That's right.
So just knowing how to use leverage and then how that changes your returns is just it's amazing.
That's right. So saving money on interest payments isn't necessarily the best way for you to invest your money to get the best cash flow out of it.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves.
Oh, we must have a bullet point for that.
We have a section on when should you leverage.
Peace of mind ownership. And that's really what this is all about, right? Having peace of mind.
That's that mindset. Like I said, there are people that just prefer to own directly versus control.
That's right.
And there's ways to control and still being an asset without actually owning it and benefiting from someone else owning it.
That's right. And the other thing too, and we talked a little bit about.
But there's no wrong way of doing it.
That's right.
It's just what you prefer to do.
So we talked a little bit about leverage. Well, my husband is that person that wants everything paid for.
Mm-hmm.
He can sleep at night when he knows he owes nobody anything,
Yeah.
and I'm a lender. So I'm of course the opposite. And you've just got to find what works for you and your family. That point of how much you're going to use. When peace of mind, you got to be able to sleep at night.
That's
Yeah,
right.
I mean, some people do want that, zero leverage. Us as lenders, like, I feel good when I'm somewhere between 40 and 60% levered. Like, that feels good. Like, I know that there's equity. I know that there's enough debt on the property that, from my perspective, that if someone wanted to come in and try to sue or whatever, like, they would still see debt. It wouldn't look like we just had a bunch of assets owned free and clear that they could just come in and take. So everyone's a little different, but some people like to max it out at 80 and they sleep just fine.
Right.
Some people have to have it 0. So it's really up to you.
Yeah, maxed out at 80. They probably didn't go through 2008. But
No.
that's a whole nother story.
Okay, once again, we're going to talk about leverage. Next slide. Here's another great reason why you should when you should invest directly in an asset. When you're not an accredited investor, you have a limited way to participate in funds if you're not an accredited investor. There are funds that are available. Regulation A and A+ funds will allow you not to be accredited.
Well,
But
will you
they-
tell everyone what accredited means?
Oh, yeah,
so
that's a
they
good
so they
one.
know.
Okay, they've widened it so much now that they're letting a lot more people into the accredited category. But if you are making $200,000 annually, and you have for the last 2 years, and expect to continue to do it, and you're a single person, you're accredited.
Mhm.
If you're a family, it's $300,000. If you
Financial
have
advisor.
$1 million in net worth,
Mm.
not counting your primary residence, and I know typically your biggest asset is your primary residence,
Right.
but at the same time, your largest debt typically is your
Right.
primary
So
residence.
you want to pull that
So
out.
sometimes it washes anyway, unless of course you're Wendy's husband and have no debt.
Yeah.
Of course, he lives under a rock. But
And then there's some other things. If you're a CPA, you're a licensed financial
advisor.
folks,
Fund manager.
yeah, yeah.
fund manager,
Then you're bona fide.
broker dealers. They want to make sure that you understand the ins and out of fund management, and they want to just make sure that you have an acumen for financial affairs.
Right. And what I think, though, is so cool about investing into different funds is you have such a wide, all the things we talked about that you can invest in personally, on your own individually, you can do that same thing in a fund, whether it's self-storage, apartment complexes, it might be a lending fund.
Mhm.
It could be a variety of things that are either open-ended, which means they're evergreen.
Calm down there. We're going to get to that in a minute.
It's
So
just-
if you're not accredited,
Yeah.
that's why you want to own an asset directly.
That's
Yeah,
right.
you can. So when you're not accredited, one of the typical vehicles that we see people use is buying notes. You don't have to be
Right.
accredited to buy notes, and you don't have to be accredited to buy a piece of a note. So if you only have $20,000, $10,000, whatever it is, you can buy pieces of notes that allow you to participate in collecting the interest on these notes, and the entry level is much lower.
Yeah.
It's great.
Yeah.
Or just to be
It's
a
a great
lender
option.
on one of those assets that we're talking about.
That's right. And it doesn't, you can have several people owning one note. So you can have itty bitty money and be able to invest in a note. You just have to get the right network around you.
Yeah.
And really know, get an education on what you're doing.
Oh, yeah.
As a disclaimer, each state has a different rule on what is a security. Some of them,
That's
if you
true.
have more than one person in a note, it may be considered a security. Some states allow up to 9 people in a loan without it being a security. So check with your state.
And then there's another, vehicle you can use, like a joint venture or some kind of equity agreement. There's a lot of people looking to buy these fix and flips or rental properties, but they need that 20, 30, 50, whatever it is, thousand that's down, but maybe they don't want to use their cash because they want to be able to show it so they can, refi it or whatever the case may be. So they use your cash as the equity contribution, and that's a good way. You don't have to be accredited to do that.
That's right.
You just create a joint venture agreement or an equity ownership agreement through the LLC.
Even with the presentation, we go off in different directions. We have one here to keep us from going down the wrong path, but it doesn't matter. We all end up going down those rabbit holes, don't we? All right.
That's
Next
funny
slide.
coming from the rabbit hole king.
Should you use cash or leverage? Leverage is good when interest rates are low.
And you have to ask us what day it is to decide
Or
whether
relative.
rates are low.
Rates are relative.
Yeah, they
When-
really are. We just this morning on our Sunrisers meeting, there's a guy that speaks and teaches every Friday morning with us, and his name's Brian Maddox, and he was talking about interest rates and where they're going. And it was this time and last year that interest rates were as low as they've been, and now we're seeing a trend of interest rates going up. They've got the Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac are saying that they believe that the rates are going to be more in the 4%, higher 4% interest rate about May of this year is what I've been told. So, and those things constantly change. You have to be able to roll with that and don't buy or sell based on that. You just work the numbers in your deal.
For sure. I mean, I've always been of the mindset, if the difference between the cost of leverage of 3.5 or 4.5 determines like the effectiveness of the deal, it was never a deal to begin with.
There you go. Great point.
So we need to be, when you're looking at these and you're getting leverage, you need to be being very conservative with your estimations of your margins. Because I mean, we go back to like the late 70s, early 80s. People were still taking leverage with 12% interest rates,
And even 18%.
and 18%. Yeah. So
my FHA loan was 14 and a half.
Yeah, that it's amazing how it's all relative to what's going on.
and 14 was lower than 15 that it was probably the month before when you did that.
Yeah.
That's
So
right.
again, we say rates are relative.
Yeah. But here
Actually, it
lately,
went up from
it's
there.
been free.
It went up. Oh, you got
Yeah.
it good.
I was in a rising interest rate environment, so I got in on the ground floor.
Yeah. But yeah, so when you're looking at these and getting leverage, you want to be underwriting for worst case scenarios. Again, if the difference between 100 or 200 basis points throws your deal off, it probably wasn't a deal. So just
And really, the question is, should you use your cash? Well, cash is always more important in your pocket than someone else's, right? And if you're measuring based on your cash on cash return, you want to make your cash invested as low as possible.
Yeah, exactly. Great point.
Next bullet point. Yes, so when the terms are long,
The loan term,
yes,
the length of the loan, right?
when the terms are long,
You want to do what?
you want to be leveraged.
Okay.
So you don't want to be leveraged if you have a 60-month term. You would rather it be a 30-year term. wouldn't
That's
you?
right. So you have it fixed
So it
and you
help-
know what's coming up.
It helps you with your cash flow.
Well, and then also going back to inflation. So what does a 30-year term do against inflation?
You pay for tomorrow's payments with today's dollars.
And today's dollar is worth
A lot less than what it's going to be in the future.
That's
Yeah,
right.
yeah
Time
the,
value.
the buying power of tomorrow's dollar is always going to be less. So you are locking in that rate and that payment. So you're paying, let's say it's $900 a month that you're paying that you're locked in for 30 years. Well, in 10 years, can that $900 payment buy that same 30-year mortgage? No, it cannot.
Or can it buy as much groceries?
Groceries or gas or whatever it
And at the
is.
same time, what's happening with that asset?
It is appreciating in value.
That's right.
And what's typically happening with the rent you're receiving?
It's increasing.
Your
right?
rent is increasing.
Hopefully.
I mean, we, with a few anomalies, we do not normally historically see rents go down. They usually stay stagnant or appreciate.
So, kind of summarized, but I know we got more. You want the terms to be as long as possible.
Mm-hmm.
You want the rate to be as low as possible, obviously, because, well, you already know why.
Well, and it's utilizing the products that you're given. So, like right now, everyone's offering, if you're doing, if you want like a long-term 30-year fixed mortgage or just a 30-year term, you can get a 5/1 ARM, which basically it means that the interest rate is reset to market at the end of 60 months, a 7-year or a 10-year. Same thing, the rates reset at the end of those terms. Now, with today's interest rate, that doesn't make sense.
Not at all.
Take the 30-year fixed all the way through. You want that. But if the rate's like Bill, 14%, maybe do the 5/1 ARM, maybe do the 7/1
See what
ARM,
happens.
because odds are, I mean, it's as likely to go down as it is to stabilize or go up.
Right.
And what I was going to mention is that don't try and pay the loan down early.
It's
not saving you any money.
That's right.
The length of the loan is saving you money.
That's right.
Correct.
Next slide. Cash is good when you're investing with your IRA. You want to explain why?
I have no idea what you mean by that point.
Well, number one, you're already getting a tax break because you're not paying any profits or paying for any profits because it's tax deferred or tax exempt.
Correct.
But what happens if you leverage an asset that you're buying through your IRA?
You have to pay additional taxes on it.
Right.
Why are you looking at me?
Because
I'm not doing it.
Because you're the IRA expert. It's called
I love using a self-directed IRA money.
It's called UBIT tax.
Yes.
Mhm.
But I don't want you guys to worry too much about UBIT and freak out and run around like your hair's on fire because you hear about UBIT because there's
Unrelated business.
Income tax.
All right.
so the IRS doesn't like it when you leverage your IRA. So if you do use your IRA to, let's say, do the down payment
Mhm.
and then make the payments out of your IRA
Mhm.
and then get a loan against that property for the rest of it, they consider that as leverage. So
Right.
they don't like that. So
Plus
they
you
have
don't-
up to 45% tax on the profit on that property. And I don't want to get into the weeds on this, but you can kind of offset that because you're not getting profit on that thing right away because, you're getting rent, you have expenses.
Yeah,
That rent is not, there's a very little profit in that rent payment, and you're only getting profit on it when you sell the asset.
Yeah. Plus, if you're using your IRA, you don't really get to take advantage of the deductions that are out there for you.
That's true. So if you use that IRA to purchase, here's
We like
Right.
to see you use it as a loan.
But here's also an advantage that
Be a lender.
you don't think about using your IRA is that you can buy a property that you may want to retire in later.
Mm-hmm.
You use it as a rental property for 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then when you become of age where you can start taking your money out at no penalty, you can turn it into an asset and then move into it
Now,
without any penalty.
Interesting.
to us who are laymen, Bill, does that mean that I have to purchase the property entirely through my IRA, or can I leverage it and pay over time and then still take it as an asset, even if I've leveraged
Well, you can
it?
do either or.
Either or, okay.
Yeah, you're still subject to that UBIT tax.
But if you buy it wholly inside your IRA, does the UBIT tax still apply because you didn't leverage it at that point?
If you don't leverage it,
Yeah.
there's no UBIT.
Yeah. So I guess
If you leverage it, you're going to be subject to it. But again, that tax actually is not going to be that high because you're not getting any profit on the rent, or not that much.
now, does it make a difference? Now, again, we're not CPAs or tax
And
professionals.
Quest is going to be a speaker. On
And yeah,
this as
definitely
well.
talk to Quest. So does it make a difference whether you're leveraging it with a Roth or a traditional? Does that make any difference?
No.
Okay.
As far as I know.
Speak with Quincy or someone at Quest.
Next slide.
Should
Yes.
you use cash or should you leverage if you need to liquidate quickly?
Well, if you need to liquidate quickly, you don't want to have a loan on it, do you?
No, not at all.
But it doesn't matter either way. Frankly, if you need to liquidate quickly, you're just not going to have a lot of liquid when you're done if it's leveraged.
Well, it just depends on what the market is out there. How quickly are investments selling at this point?
Mhm.
And whether it's a note that you're trying to sell or a house that you're trying to sell and you need to liquidate,
Mhm.
it really, really depends on the market of what's going on. Right now, you can liquidate pretty quickly.
Yep.
So whether you have cash or you're leveraging it, you're going to be able to get a home sold pretty quick.
Right.
Notes, what's the interest rate? All of that depends on how that note's set up.
Mhm. And then, how quickly do you need to liquidate? Let's say it is a note and you need to liquidate quickly. Do you sell it at par, which is 100% of what's
Right.
owed? Or do you sell it at a slight discount, 90 cents on the dollar, 85 cents on the dollar?
Right.
So there are those options out there.
Sure. Next slide. Okay, another thing, back to Wendy's husband,
we
peace
like
of
that
mind.
peace of mind.
Mind.
If you follow Dave Ramsey and you want to be free and clear of everything, that's great. And Dave does a great job of speaking to the masses.
Right.
But I can tell you this right now. You cannot scale any kind of portfolio without the use of leverage.
That's right. I agree.
Unless you have, $100 million sitting in your bank.
Most people don't have deep enough pockets to be able to scale using cash. But
Right.
if it makes you sleep better at night, use cash. I will tell you this. If you need money right away, not having cash is not a good thing.
Yeah. I mean, that's true. Even when we underwrite things, we care about how much money you have in the bank. How much cash can you get your hands on tomorrow?
Yeah.
That's a big question for us.
So if you use up all your cash in a deal and then you need more cash, guess what?
You're going to have trouble borrowing it.
The old bank adage, I can't make you this loan. You actually need it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. We see it time and time again where people, use cash to buy up, 1, 2, 3 properties, what have you. And then they're like, well, I need to buy more. Well, can I get this loan? It's like, well, no, because you don't have reserves to pay for it or carry it for any period of time. You're banking on the asset itself carrying you, which, I mean, it can, but you can't underwrite to that.
Yeah.
So
You always have to have dry powder.
yeah, I mean,
Right.
that's one of those things, like, we always talk about that. It's asset rich, cash poor. I mean, we see that a lot.
Yeah.
And it's just people who, in my opinion, are putting the cart before the horse. Like, you need to use cash if you want, just don't use it all.
Right.
And that's our opinion. Keep a reserve, just for one thing, for dry powder, but also, for underwriting purposes, so that you can pass the, more or less the red face test with the lender.
Right. I like that.
Next slide.
We need to hurry, y'all.
Okay. When should you invest indirectly? When you're an accredited investor, that's when you should be investing indirectly.
That's right. And you
And-
don't have to work. You don't want to work. Let's put it that way.
And believe me, if you're an accredited investor, and by the way, we're going to start moving through these a lot quicker because we are
Running out of time.
We're we're talking too much. So
What you mean we?
if you're an accredited investor, by all means, you should take advantage of being in funds.
Mm-hmm.
And why do we do that?
So that you can create passive returns. So your money is working even while you're sleeping.
And you're much more diversified than buying assets on your own. In order for you to get a portfolio, you got to buy individual assets and build them up. Typically,
You have to find them, you have to underwrite them, you have to finance them, you have to close them, service them, manage them, whatever the case may be. If you put your money into a fund, you put your money in a fund, and someone else is doing all of those things, and you are diversified against dozens, if not hundreds, of assets. So that if you bought a 10 property portfolio, one goes down, a tenth of your income is gone. If you're in a fund with hundreds of assets, one property goes down, you don't even see it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it doesn't even really equate to like a couple pennies.
so with $100,000 buying a fund, and let's assuming it's a debt fund, and you have 200 loans in that debt fund, you're diversified over 200 loans.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you're in a property holding fund that has a bunch of rental properties in it, and let's say they have 100 units,
Then
you're diversified over 100.
Yep.
If $100,000 to buy a house,
even in the most,
you have one unit.
yeah, I mean,
That's right.
I was going to say 2 or 3 at the most. Yeah.
That's right.
So,
That's
so
right.
you're able to be a lot safer in your investments,
Right.
By investing in funds.
Mm.
Slide. All right, so you don't have the time, or you want to be passive. That's another reason you want to invest indirectly, because if you're investing directly, typically it's going to be more active.
Yep.
And it could be like a second job.
Right.
Or a first one.
But passive doesn't mean basically uneducated in what you're investing in, or ignoring what's going on with what you're investing in.
Yeah.
What's so great about funds is that there's such a variety out there that you can invest in. And I spoke on this a little bit previously in the session. It's so important to understand what kind of a fund you're investing in. It can be a short-term fund. It can be an evergreen where it's never going to end. It can be a debt fund where you're investing in someone who's lending, or it can be a fund for a new construction on an apartment complex, or a value add on apartment complex, or we have a friend that has a fund where all he does is buy up self-storage facilities. So it's amazing the variety of things that you can choose from to invest in when you're investing in a fund.
And the fund gives you the ability, most of them, to choose cash flow, which is what we're talking about, or growth. So you can choose between the two, depending on where you are, especially what we're talking about now. Cash flow is really important.
And with growth, you have the opportunity to compound what you're earning.
Correct.
And many funds will give you the option to choose one or the other, and you can change as you go through. But I think the importance when you're looking to invest in the fund is, number one, know who the sponsor is. Who is that? Who's the management company? Who's running that fund? Who is the fund investing in?
What's their track record?
Yeah, and we're going to get to that when we're going to talk about the structure here coming up. Next slide. And we've already talked about this, the maximizing your diversification. So guess what? Next slide. And this is really important. In a fund, you're able to plug into full-time investors' businesses.
Which relates back to what I was saying, is that it's really important to understand who it is you're investing in, and use your network of other people that like, and trust that may or may not be investing in funds, and they can tell you who they like and who to stay away from.
Yep.
Yeah, and the key here is that most people that have funds have been doing this for a while.
Right.
and they have a track record. And those are the people that you want to be plugged in with, because they're going to help you make money because they have been making money, and that fund is integral in how they run their business. And you want to be a part of that, and you want to ride those coattails.
And everyone has, a different threshold for what is experienced. For us, when we look at it, it's managing a fund for more than 5 years.
Yeah.
Like if they have done it for more than 5 years, there's solid data points that you can look back on and see, was there adversity? Did they overcome it? All those things, or what happened.
And I like the way you said, was there adversity? There will always be adversity in just about every fund that you will look into, and understand the thing you're looking for is, what did they do to get out of it?
Yep.
How did they handle everything when they went through that downturn, or whatever it was that may have happened in that fund? And that's what you're looking for is character. Just like when you want to invest in one person, you want to invest in really the company and their character, how they carry themselves. And there's a
Correct.
lot of good opportunities and people out there to do this with.
Absolutely. Next slide. Okay, pause just a minute. Scott, we're going to probably have to cut out an entire section.
No, you
we're
won't.
already at
No.
51 minutes.
No, you won't. How long is this? How long is this from here? Because we probably
Hit the
wasted
next-
5 minutes.
Hit the next bullet point. Wasted 5 minutes doing what?
Uh-oh, bullet point's not working.
No, they're working.
No,
They
he got out of
You
that.
just have to hit play.
Tell me how
So-
long it needs to be.
Stay on that. It
No
needs
more
to-
than 50 minutes.
Yeah, 50 minutes.
Okay.
So
So
you
I'll
think
I'll
that-
make sure that
We've
it's 50
wasted about-
minutes. I'll make sure it's 49 minutes and 30 seconds, so you don't have to worry if you need
Okay.
too much. Well,
Okay.
That's really
All right.
weird on that page, isn't it? Okay.
But you're already on the last
just-
slide.
Just hit play,
Just
because
And
Yeah, just hit play.
it's bullet points in the background is what you're
And
looking
they're
at.
animated.
we're on my slide. Okay.
Okay, so indirect funds or indirect investments, funds, and the type of structures. So you have loan funds, and those are called mortgage pool funds. And then you have funds that have assets in them.
Correct.
So a mortgage pool fund is just what we're talking about, or just what it says.
Yeah, it's a pool of mortgages
Mhm.
based, so they're backed by real estate security instruments, whether it's a mortgage or a deed of trust, and you combine them. A pool, is just a whole aggregation of them, and you utilize that to create diversity, or some of them utilize it to to be big enough to do securitizations.
And then the asset funds are going to do the same thing. Typically, and I don't want to get into this.
They're the ones that are senior assisted living centers.
I was going to say they could be any kind of property holding.
Right. That's a great way to cover it.
But one is going to essentially hold notes, and the other one is essentially going to hold real estate.
Correct. Yeah, one will offer up. It's a debt instrument, pass through interest or pass through income only.
Right.
The other one will be passing through usually less income, but also depreciation.
Yes.
Next slide, please. Okay, evergreen and closed end. So you want to talk about the differences?
Sure. So evergreen is the ones that are green. No, the evergreen just means that it goes on forever and ever. There is no predetermined end date. It can be wound down at a certain point, given the manager's direction or a vote by the members of the fund.
Right.
But it has no predetermined end date. It will just keep going. Those are typically used for compound growth. You can take distributions from them, but typically in an evergreen fund, you're going to see a lot more people. It's going to be more like a growth fund. Like you're going to put 50,000 in or 100,000 in. Let's use 50, and then in 6 to 7 years it will have doubled,
Mhm.
assuming that you hit an 8 to 9% interest or return or income for those years, and then you can switch it over to collecting income at that point
Right.
or disbursements. So it allows the option for both. A closed end is typically going to be used more in syndications or that asset fund that we
Mhm.
talked about, because it's going to be the purchase of an asset, the repositioning of it, and then the liquidation, whether that's refinance or sale.
Yeah, an example of closed end is right after 2008, a few hedge funds went in and bought up a bunch of single family assets. They purchased them, really cheaply. They put tenants in them, or they did seller financing type notes on them. And at the end of a 7-year period, they liquidated all the assets, and then they paid out all the investors.
Right.
They paid them income along the way, and then at the end of the term, they just liquidated everything and then paid out everybody with.
Yeah.
And in those closed-end funds, the PPM, the private placement memorandum, will explain to you what the closed-end really is. When that date is intended to be, whether it's an intention for a refinance or a sale of the property or properties that might be in it. So all of that is explained in that PPM. Read them.
And another, I'm glad you mentioned PPM. One of the main things to focus on when you're looking at that PPM is the waterfall.
Mm.
How does the liquidation and the income of those assets get dispersed, and to whom and when? So you want to make sure that as the investor, you are superior to to the sponsor. You want to make sure that you are getting your money back before the sponsor is getting their money back.
Right. When you said superior, it doesn't mean that you're better.
Next bullet point. Whether the fund is a debt or an equity fund, that makes a difference, doesn't it?
It does.
Big difference.
So in a debt fund, essentially you're lending the fund money.
Mhm.
Or the fund only deals in debt. They are only lending money. But you can still be an equity partner in a debt fund.
Mhm.
But typically, debt versus equity is that you're, on the debt side, you're lending. On the equity side, you own a piece of the fund or a piece of the asset.
So you're participating in that.
So typically in a debt fund, you're going to get higher returns monthly, quarterly, annually, whatever that is.
Right.
On the equity side, you're going to get lower returns with a promise of a higher return at the end, because that's where the equity is realized at the end, whether it's sold or refinanced.
So that's more likely to be a closed-ended
That's
fund.
more likely to be a closed-ended fund, and there's more speculation built into that. There are great equity plays, but typically, you want to look at the market cycle, whether you want to be in debt or equity.
But again, it depends on the fund. For example, our fund is a debt fund, but we have no debt members. They're all equity members.
Correct.
So our fund pays income. So it's the equity members are getting paid based on the income that the fund receives.
Yeah. In your typical debt structure on a fund, not like ours where everyone, is contributing debt, it's paying out interest rates, or what we would call a preferred rate of return to those investors. And then I think it's like the 80-20. So the manager would get a 2% management fee. They pay the pref to the investors, and then everything above that was split 80-20.
And it's really, really important. I got to say this again. All of these things are explained in your PPM, private placement memorandum, and you need to read it. Don't just blow through it. Read it. It's actually understandable.
Yeah.
They don't use a whole lot of big words.
No, they have to, in your PPM, you have to outline what the fund is investing in, how it's going to invest in, and then what is the waterfall or the return of capital and how that flows. And those are usually itemized in easy to read charts. So those are things to pay very close attention to.
And ask questions. Whoever it is you're interested in investing with, ask them questions.
If you can't explain it to your spouse, I wouldn't invest in it.
Yeah. Hell, that's a great rule.
Next slide. Syndications. You want to take that one?
Sure. Syndications. So syndications are usually one asset, and it's a sponsor going in to buy that asset, but they don't have the liquidity to cover the equity contributions that is needed to buy the asset. So what do? We call it, they syndicate the equity that's needed. So I reach out, I want to buy a property, but I don't have $1 million to bring down. But Wendy and Bill each have 500,000. So I go to them and say, hey, can I use your 500,000? And in return, I will give you 20% equity of the asset, plus I'll give you a preferred rate of return of 5% along the way. And so as a sponsor, I will pay them 5%. And then when we exit the property, I will give them the equity component that we discussed, the 20%. That's a very simple way of explaining what a syndication is.
Or a syndication could also be that you're just raising all the money
Yes.
as an equity. All the people would be equity partners, and you're not getting a loan for any of the difference.
Correct.
You're just raising all the money. It just depends on how large the project is.
Yeah, typically, we're going to see over 2 to 5 million purchase price. The syndication is going to be just on the equity, and there's going to be a debt component. Under that, people feel comfortable raising the full purchase price and capex, capital expenditure, through the equity partners.
Yeah. Again, every fund is a little bit different. Read the PV.
Mm-hmm.
Next slide, please. Okay. So I hope you guys got
Clear as
of-
mud.
I hope you got some value out of this. We just wanted to kind of point out the assets that we feel are going to be, like I said, the best hedge against inflation, and are also going to be the most liquid. So you can get your money back if you hate it.
That's right. And if you have any questions at all about what you've learned today, you are more than welcome to contact any of us. You can reach us at our email that's our website, carolinahardmoney.com. Our emails are bill@carolinahardmoney.com, wendy@carolinahardmoney.com, and jonathan@carolinahardmoney.com. And Jonathan is spelled Joe Nathan.
JONATHAN. And remember, when we're talking about the assets to invest in, you want to be in assets that are very flexible. So those single family, multifamily that are low entry points to get into, that are affordable, and those that aren't being highly sought after by the larger hedge funds or
Right.
aggregators of these multifamily units.
That's right.
You want to have the least amount of competition.
Mhm.
And check out Wednesdays with Wendy. I do a free mentoring. I don't sell it. It's all free. Would love to talk to you, spend 30 minutes with you, help you answer whatever questions you have, and direct you in your investing and hook you up with other people that can help you.
And lastly, if you go to our website, carolinahardmoney.com, we also do a weekly live YouTube show, which is also recorded constantly, and we're always doing videos. So go to our YouTube channel. You can easily get there through our website. Lots of free education.
Thanks.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.